Hey guys, I'm Dimension Jumper. Today I'll be reviewing the Game Boy Advance Switch Online service, which was released back in February of this year, and this was also released along with the Game Boy Online system and the Game Boy Advance. As I said before, with the Game Boy Advance, with the Game Boy Online system, the Nintendo 64 one, and the NES and SNES ones. Basically bring in old games from that particular era of its console life, and is basically on the Switch online service system. And yeah, I would say again, this is basically just new ways, or just another way of having old fans playing, or new fans playing these old games. And yeah, I would say it's a nice way of just having these old games getting to be experienced about because we've got games like Mario Kart Super Circuit, I believe, as well as The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap and Metroid Fusion, I believe, and some other games in that lineup. And I would say these games are quite interesting. I would say I think when it comes to when you compare the games from both the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, I would say they both have enjoyable games to play. But I would say probably played more of the Game Boy one, mainly because it's got Tetris, and I think Tetris is a really fun game to play. And yeah, I'm not saying that the Game Boy Advance isn't isn't bad or shouldn't be played. I feel like if you want to play it and have experience playing these old games, if you're a new fan, then I highly suggest you go and play these old games and just have fun with them, because some of the games are really enjoyable. Like, I've played through the Minish Cap, not on the online system, but mainly during the Wii U era. And yeah, I would say the Minish Cap is fun if you've enjoyed Legend of Zelda, and if you're new to the series since, let's say, Breath of the Wild, then and you have the online system and you have the Game Boy Advance one, I suggest you go and play the Game Boy Advance Zelda game, with that being the Minish Cap. And now it's time for me showing you how the Game Boy Advance system online works. So, like with the Game Boy Online system, as well as the other online systems that we've been getting over the last few years since the release of the online system, you can basically play a select number of games, with more games being released along the line. So, and as always, you can choose whatever games you can choose. Well, they're there. And so let's go with Super Mario Bros. 3, because I think that's the most easiest to talk about. So let's go with this. Okay, so Mario, let's go with that. Okay. So yeah, I would say that the Game Boy Online system is fun. I think it's really enjoyable to play these games, these old games on a modern console. I think it's just really nice, and I think it's just getting to experience old games, because I have played the Minish Cap on the Wii U back before back before the Switch even was really a thing. And like with all the other things, if you die or something happens, hang on. Okay, you can suspend the game, or whatever game you're in, and go back a couple of moments before you do die, or that particular thing happens. And I think that's just really great, because you can just basically just save yourself, and even if you're playing let's say a Mario game, let's say for example, you can you can keep the life that you, or the 1-up that you have. So I think that's quite easy. I think that's quite useful. I think that's quite nice. Let's choose a different game now. And then there's this one, which I think is one of my favourites that I've played. Just because it's one of those nice games you can play. To me, it's kind of like how Tetris is for me in the Game Boy online system. Just in the sense that you can play it every so often for like half an hour or so, and it just feels peaceful. It just feels peaceful and nice to play about. Just like just because it even though it feels like a game, it's not like a lot of the other games that I've played, like the Legend of Zelda, Mario, Sonic, Smash Bros, any of those kinds of games where it's all about action. This one is more about just thinking of how to get through a particular level, and yeah, I think that's mainly how you play the game, and yeah, I think this is just one of those fun games I'll play every once in a while, and just have fun from it because it's a really enjoyable game. So that's been it for how the system works. Now it's time to go back to the review. So overall, I would say that the Game Boy Advance online system is enjoyable. I would say that, compared to the Game Boy, the original Game Boy games that have been released on the online system, I think the games are enjoyable. I think if you combine both the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance games together in terms of the online system, these are some really interesting, fun games to play, because you've got like the Zelda games, you've got like Link's Awakening, the Oracle games that are being released soon, the Minish Cap. Then you've got Metroid, Mario, Kirby, even Tetris for the Game Boy. A lot of really cool, interesting games that people know, as well as some other games that you might not have heard of or known they were on the Game Boy or Game Boy Advance. For instance, on the Game Boy Advance, there's this game where you have to try and avoid the edges, and you're basically this little sort of crane thing. It's kind of hard to explain, but you're basically this little crane thing, and it's basically you have to go from one end of the level to the end without bumping into any of the edges, and that's really cool. That's a really fun game that I've played a bit on the Game Boy Advance, and it's not really a game that I've heard of, because I didn't really grow up with the Game Boy Advance games, and I think it's one of those fascinating games that you will probably have a lot of fun in every now and again. It's kind of like the Tetris of the Game Boy Advance games in terms of the online system that the games that already are, in terms of I might play for like half an hour, and I'll have a fun time playing that particular game. And yeah, I would say it's nice. I would say that the Game Boy Advance, the games we have now, are nice, and there are some upcoming games that are going to be released. I believe one of them being Kirby, another one being Fire Emblem, I believe. So yeah, overall, I think the Game Boy Advance game or online system is enjoyable, and it's fun. I would say. I think it's probably one of my favorites. I would say, if you put that combining with the Game Boy online system of games. So yeah. So that's been my review for the Game Boy Advanced, Game Boy Advanced system online for the Switch. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.